He vanished, just like that. No sirens, no final goodbyes, just a billionaire executive sliding silently out of the world's most surveilled country, inside a music box. Yes, a music box. But this isn't some magician's trick or Hollywood thriller. This is the true jaw-dropping escape of Carlos Ghosn, the man who turned bankrupt companies into billion-dollar empires only to be locked up, betrayed, and hunted like a criminal. What could drive a man of such global stature to risk everything in one of the most audacious getaways the world has ever seen? Let's go back to where it all began. Carlos Ghosn wasn't just another suit behind a CEO title. He was a relentless strategist, a multilingual genius with roots in Lebanon, Brazil, and France. He graduated in France and began his climb at Michelin, the tire manufacturing giant. By sheer force of brilliance and brutal efficiency, he rose to run Michelin's North American division, an achievement few foreign-born executives ever reach. That's when Renault, France's top car manufacturer at the time, came knocking. They were bleeding cash and hemorrhaging confidence, so they brought in Ghosn as a last hope. 1 year later, under his leadership, Renault wasn't just breathing, it was booming. But his methods, they weren't subtle. Carlos Ghosn earned a nickname in the French press, Lacoste Killer. He was ruthless. Plants were shut. Thousands lost their jobs. Entire departments vanished overnight. Protests erupted, but Carlos didn't flinch. He had a singular mission: cut the fat, revive the company. And it worked. Renault was reborn. But Ghosn wasn't finished. His eyes turned to Japan, where another automotive titan was in freefall: Nissan. $20 billion in debt. Over 50 car models, only 3 of them profitable. Banks refused to touch them. Even the Japanese government was letting it sink. Carlos Ghosn saw something no one else did. In 1999, Renault acquired a 37% stake in Nissan. Then, in a historic twist, a foreigner, Ghosn, was appointed CEO of a Japanese corporation. That move alone broke every unspoken rule in Japan's corporate culture. From the moment he landed, he ignited a cultural earthquake. Factories were shut down, thousands laid off. He stripped away Japan's rigid seniority system, replacing it with Western-style merit-based promotions. English became the company's official language. It was bold. It was brutal. It was blasphemy. And it worked. Nissan roared back to life in just 1 year. Ghosn, once reviled, became revered. People bowed when he entered restaurants. His face appeared in manga comics. He was praised as a savior in a country that once feared him. They called him the man with the magic touch. By 2005, Ghosn had achieved the impossible. He was now the CEO of both Renault and Nissan, simultaneously leading 2 global powerhouses across 2 continents. No one had done it before. Few could imagine the pressure. His salary ballooned to $17 million annually. Not scandalous by Western standards, but in Japan, where modesty is virtue, it sparked envy. He became a target, especially as his lavish lifestyle drew attention. Yachts, private jets, designer suits, luxury homes across the world. In France and Brazil, he was a respected executive. In Japan, he became a foreign emperor, flaunting his gold in a kingdom of discipline. And in the shadows, resentment grew. On November 19, 2018, it all came crashing down. Ghosn was flying from Paris to Tokyo on his private jet, unaware that a trap had been set. As soon as he landed, he was met not by chauffeurs or colleagues, but by a wall of uniformed officers. He was arrested before his feet touched the tarmac. The charge? Financial misconduct. He was thrown into solitary confinement in a Tokyo detention center. No trial, no full explanation, no lawyer present. Just cold metal bars and an endless stream of interrogations. Outside, chaos erupted. Nissan stock plummeted, and Gozen, the man who built the empire, waited for his company to defend him. They didn't. Instead, his own board appointed a replacement and declared him guilty in a public press conference. Accusations rained in: unreported income, tax evasion, luxury homes bought with company money, and a $700,000 Versailles party that suspiciously fell on his birthday. The narrative shifted overnight from savior to villain, but Gozen pushed back. He claimed the homes were for official use. The party? Celebrating 15 years of the reign known as an alliance, not his birthday. And as for the so-called undeclared income, it was a retirement fund, never even dispersed. How do you report money you haven't received? Still, the authorities didn't care. They kept him locked up for 3 months, interrogating him for hours, sometimes 14 straight, without a lawyer. His wife was threatened, his family targeted, his image tarnished, and when he finally made bail for a jaw-dropping $9 million, he was released into a media frenzy. Reporters camped outside his home. Drones flew overhead. Paparazzi followed every step. So he tweeted. Carlos Gozen announced a press conference where he promised to expose everything: the betrayal, the lies, the political motives. The next morning he was rearrested. Now the bail cost doubled, another $5 million, and new restrictions. No phones, no internet, no contact with his wife. Only one passport allowed his French. No leaving the country. No interviews. No speeches. They didn't want justice. They wanted him silent. Japan's justice system boasts a 99.4% conviction rate. You read that right? It's nearly impossible to win against the prosecution. Carlos knew it. His lawyers knew it. There was no trial. This was a quiet execution of character. So he made a decision. He would escape. Using a smuggled phone, he began plotting in secret. He spoke only in the bathroom, fearing surveillance devices. He assembled a mysterious Team X Special Forces international contacts, a network of people who owed him or believed in him. They ruled out sea routes too slow. Air was the only option. But he was under a strict travel ban. Then came the loophole. A small airport in Osaka had limited screening capabilities. Large boxes like the kind used for musical instruments weren't scanned due to equipment limitations. If he could get to that airport and into one of those boxes, he might just vanish. The plan was cinematic, almost absurd. 2 men posing as musicians would fly in with large instrument cases. They'd claim they had a performance in Tokyo, then a second one in Istanbul, leaving the same day. Their real cargo? Carlos Gozen. The men? Mike Taylor, a former U.S. Green Beret, and George Zayek, a security contractor. Together they rehearsed every detail. But first, they had to outsmart the Japanese surveillance teams stationed outside Gozen's home. Carlos did something clever. He leaked his surveillance complaints to the media. When reporters arrived to investigate, the spies vanished, not wanting to be exposed. That was his window. Disguised in a puffy winter coat, face mask, and beanie. Nothing unusual for a Japanese winter. He slipped out of his home unnoticed. He met with Taylor and Zayek at the Grand Hyatt. From there, they took a train to Osaka, blending in with holiday travelers. At a hotel near the airport, a black box awaited. It looked like it carried speakers or a cello, sturdy, reinforced with tiny breathing holes. Carlos got in. They wrapped the box in cloth and labeled it sensitive equipment. Another identical box carried actual instruments for added cover. Loaded onto a private jet bound for Istanbul, the boxes bypassed inspection. As the customs officers joked about musicians smuggling women, the real smuggle went completely unnoticed. Carlos lay still for over 30 minutes, heart pounding, ears tuned to every vibration. Then the engine roared. The jet took off. He had done it. When the plane landed in Istanbul, another contact whisked him onto a waiting jet bound for Beirut. In Lebanon, customs officers greeted him like a returning hero. No handcuffs, no press, just a quiet smile and a handshake. Carlos Ghosn had made it out. But his journey was far from over. When Carlos Ghosn landed in Beirut, his feet touched Lebanese soil, but his heart was still racing. For the first time in over a year, he wasn't watched. He wasn't confined. He wasn't being told when to speak, who he could talk to, or how long he could breathe fresh air. He was free, but freedom doesn't erase betrayal, and it certainly doesn't silence the noise. The world exploded when the news broke. Carlos Ghosn had escaped Japan. A man under one of the strictest bail conditions in legal history had vanished without a trace, leaving behind government surveillance, international scrutiny, and a multi-billion-dollar company that had once cheered his name. The headlines couldn't get enough. Some called it genius. Others called it arrogance. But almost everyone called it impossible. Behind the scenes, Japan's government was humiliated. The prosecutors who once paraded their 99% conviction rate were now scrambling to explain how their most high-profile suspect had slipped past them in a literal black box, and they weren't alone. Interpol, at Japan's request, issued a red notice and international arrest warrant. But Lebanon wasn't biting. Not only was Carlos a Lebanese citizen, but Lebanon also had no extradition agreement with Japan. In the eyes of Beirut, Carlos was not a fugitive. He was family, and Lebanon wasn't alone in their suspicion of Japan's justice system. Human rights organizations had already criticized Japan for its hostage justice model, where suspects could be held indefinitely without charges unless they confessed. Carlos had been placed in solitary for months, interrogated for hours a day without his lawyers present, denied contact with his wife, and rearrested just for tweeting about a press conference. This wasn't due process, this was personal. But who made it personal, and why? Carlos Ghosn finally had the microphone, and for the first time since his arrest, he used it. A week after his escape, Ghosn held a televised press conference in Beirut. The room was packed with reporters, flashing cameras, and murmuring skeptics. But when he stepped up to the podium, there was no hesitation in his voice. "I did not flee justice," he said. "I fled injustice." And with that, he detonated a bombshell. According to Ghosn, this fall wasn't about tax evasion. It was about power, political power, national pride, and most of all, fear. For years, Nissan had been watching Renault increase its stake in their company. It wasn't just a partnership anymore. It was a quiet takeover. And with the French government owning a major slice of Renault, Japanese executives feared that Nissan would eventually be absorbed, its name erased from history. Gozen had always reassured them that he believed in a balanced alliance. But for Nissan's old guard, that wasn't enough. They didn't trust a foreigner to preserve Japanese legacy, so they decided to act before it was too late. According to Gozen, key members of Nissan's board worked hand in hand with Japanese prosecutors to bring him down. They dug through every expense, every corporate apartment, every retirement fund. And when they couldn't find anything criminal, they reframed it as unethical. The party at Versailles? It was public, approved, and known to all. The homes in Rio, Beirut, and Paris? All listed under the company's corporate travel plan used by Gozen for work as CEO of 2 global brands. The undeclared salary? It wasn't even finalized. A retirement payout hadn't been received and therefore didn't require declaration, at least not under international accounting standards. But the truth didn't matter anymore. The moment he became inconvenient, they twisted the facts, turned the media against him, and painted him as a criminal. And the worst part? France, the very country whose company he helped save, stood by in silence. Not a word from the government, not a statement from Renault, not even a defense of due process. To Carlos, it felt like a global conspiracy. Everyone wanted him gone, but no one wanted their fingerprints on the trigger. And while the press conference answered some questions, it raised even more. Who were the people that helped him escape? He wouldn't say. What routes did he take? And how did he plan it? He wouldn't reveal details only to protect those still vulnerable. But bits and pieces trickled out. The box he used was custom designed for large audio equipment, lined with foam and ventilated discreetly. His team had practiced the entire operation down to the second. The Osaka airport was chosen because of its outdated scanner systems for oversized luggage. The musicians who smuggled him out, former operatives with military backgrounds. And the timing, right before New Year's, was intentional. Fewer staff, sloppier inspections, a perfect storm of chaos and complacency. Still, critics asked, was this justice? Or was it just a billionaire buying his way out? To Gozen, the answer was obvious. If I had stayed in Japan, he said in an interview, I would have died there. Not physically, but piece by piece. My reputation, my voice, my family. Everything would have been crushed. The deeper he went, the more political the story became. Back in Tokyo, prosecutors doubled down. They claimed Gozen's escape proved he was guilty. They arrested his lawyers for allegedly allowing him access to communications. They raided his former residence. They even arrested the 2 operatives who helped him after convincing the U.S. to extradite them. In a heart-breaking twist, one of the men, Mike Taylor, was imprisoned in Japan and later released only after pleading guilty. He said in court, I would do it again. I believe Gozen was innocent. But in the shadows of diplomacy, France was also quietly stirring. Under pressure, French authorities began their own investigation into Gozen's finances. Years later, they issued their own arrest warrant for him, this time over alleged misuse of funds during his time at Renault. The evidence? Vague, still under review. Yet the warrant made one thing clear. No country wanted to be seen as defending him. And so the man who once ruled over 2 automotive giants now lived in quiet exile in Beirut. His fortune diminished, his empire dismantled, but his voice unshaken. In Lebanon, he became a public figure once again, but not as a CEO, as a symbol. To some, he represented resistance against rigged systems. To others, a man who outwitted a broken process. Carlos spent his days doing interviews, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and co-authoring a book about his ordeal. He claimed he wanted accountability, not revenge. Still, the scars ran deep. In one interview, he recalled how he used to count the number of screws in his solitary cell just to hold on to sanity. He remembered writing letters to his wife that never got sent. Letters he rewrote over and over just to feel connected. He remembered how the silence inside his cell was so loud, it felt like the air was pressing down on his lungs. And then, the moment he escaped, the moment the jet lifted off the runway in Osaka, he said it felt like someone removed a noose from around his soul. But he also knew that he'd never be completely free. Japan never closed his case. France kept his charges open. Interpol red notices still threatened him if he left Lebanon. He was both hero and hostage celebrated and hunted. And perhaps most haunting of all, the world still didn't know the full story. Because for all the truth he revealed, Carlos kept one thing hidden. What exactly was promised to him if he had stayed quiet? Who was the real architect of the betrayal? And what secrets did he hold that made powerful institutions across 3 continents want him erased? But then again, one thing is clear: Carlos Ghosn didn't just flee a country. He fled a system. He fled a silence that wanted to swallow him whole. He fled a justice machine built to grind people down, not lift truth up. But was he running toward something, or away from everything? For months, Ghosn remained silent about one crucial question. How did a man monitored by Japanese intelligence, under 24/7 surveillance, manage to organize a global escape operation under their noses? Sure, he hinted at ex-military help. He acknowledged a loophole at Osaka's airport. But insiders knew better. This wasn't just a clever plan. It was military-grade precision, with timing that bordered on surgical. It was global coordination, funding, and most terrifying of all, inside access. In late 2020, whispers began to circulate. Someone high up had looked the other way. Someone with the authority to flick a switch and kill the cameras. A leak from a former airport contractor added fuel to the fire. The security system that typically logged all large cargo had glitched just once on December 29th. The glitch lasted 6 minutes, long enough for one unscanned box to disappear from the system. 6 minutes. That wasn't an accident. That was sabotaged out suddenly. The story wasn't just about an executive fleeing trial. It was about what he was fleeing from and who helped him escape. Some speculated foreign intelligence got involved. Ghosn had powerful ties in France, Lebanon, and Brazil. Was it possible one of those countries quietly pulled strings to get him out? More shockingly, was it possible someone inside Nissan had helped? And then, just when the world thought the story had gone cold, it erupted again. In mid-2021, a private email leak surfaced from a disgruntled former executive at Nissan. Buried in thousands of documents was a single memo dated 6 months before Ghosn's arrest, detailing an internal contingency plan to ensure corporate autonomy. One paragraph stood out like a gunshot in a quiet room. Ghosn's growing. Influence and plans for irreversible merger must be neutralized before Q1. If necessary, partner with outside authorities to enforce administrative realignment. Acceptable outcome. Complete removal. It didn't name names, but it said everything. This wasn't about justice. It was a corporate coup. Carlos Ghosn hadn't been arrested for tax evasion. He had been targeted for consolidation. He was getting too powerful, too ambitious, and above all, he was foreign. The board feared he'd erase Nissan's identity in a full merger with Renault. So they decided to destroy him before he destroyed them. And they almost did. But here's the twist that broke. Everything wide-open Carlos Ghosn wasn't the only one being watched. 6 months after his escape, another figure vanished quietly. A financial auditor from within Renault's Paris office. She had access to years of payroll records, travel expenses, and confidential communications. Her disappearance was never covered by French media. It was written off as leave of absence. But she resurfaced in Beirut under a different name. She contacted Carlos, and she had something that would blow the case wide open. It was a recording, buried deep in Renault's internal server backups, of a private meeting between top Renault and Nissan executives. In the audio, one Japanese board member says, "We just need the French to sit still while we take him down. By the time he's behind bars, there will be no more merger, no more empire, just Nissan reborn." There it was, clear as day. The intent, the betrayal, the conspiracy. Carlos Ghosn now had the smoking gun, and yet he didn't release it. Why? Because Carlos knew something darker, something that never made it to the headlines, or his press conferences, or even his book. His escape didn't come without a cost. You see, not long after he arrived in Lebanon, something happened that chilled him more than any courtroom threat. His longtime security consultant, a former Mossad-trained operative named Hadi, was found dead in his apartment in Turkey. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, just a single note left behind. "You were never meant to walk away." Hadi had been one of the few who knew every detail of the escape plan, and he wasn't suicidal. Carlos understood the message: stay silent, or they'll start removing the others. So he kept the recording hidden, he kept the names hidden, he stayed quiet, even when French authorities piled on with new charges, even when Interpol renewed their red notice, even when the world called him a fugitive, because he wasn't running from a trial anymore. He was protecting the people who saved his life. But here's what no one saw coming. In 2024, during an interview with a Brazilian news channel, Carlos was asked one final question: "Do you regret escaping?" He paused, smiled faintly, and said, "No, I regret not escaping sooner, because if I hadn't, you'd be interviewing my wife about my funeral, not me." Then he added something strange, something no one could explain. "But don't worry, the truth always comes home, even if it has to travel in a box." And just like that, he ended the interview. The clip went viral. The cryptic last line, the grin, the mention of the truth coming home in a box. People wondered, was he planning to release the recording? Was he signaling something bigger? A week later, the leaked memo, the one with the neutralized Ghosn line, was mysteriously mailed to 6 global journalists. No return address, no fingerprints, only one phrase stamped across the top in bold red: "The escape was only chapter 1. To this day, no one knows who sent it. No one knows who else was involved. And no one knows what Carlos Ghosn is truly sitting on. But one thing is certain: this was never a story about a billionaire escaping in a box. This was the story of how power, pride, and politics colluded to destroy a man only to underestimate the one thing he had left, his will to survive. And now, that story lives in the shadows of Beirut, behind guarded walls, waiting for the day when all the pieces will surface. Until then, you can call him a criminal, you can call him a genius, but whatever you do, don't call him done, because Carlos Ghosn isn't hiding, he's waiting, and when the world least expects it, he'll drop the final truth, and it won't just shake Japan, it'll shake the entire world. Boom. The escape was just the beginning. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, imagine what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another mind-blowing escape, betrayal, or secret the world tried to bury. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover the truth, one unbelievable story at a time.